And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power Hour podcast. I'm here with Mark Smith, leader of the 90-Day Mentoring Challenge, and has been doing so much community work for so long. So glad to have your time, Mark. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
We'll get right into this because I honestly, I've got so many questions prepared, so much knowledge that I know you've been sharing and perhaps can share on this podcast as well. So I guess just a quick introduction for the people who haven't heard of you. Who is Mark Smith?
Excellent. So yeah, I'm Mark Smith. I'm better known online as nz365guy. I had to create that online persona because the name Mark Smith didn't show up in search engines for
Right.
years. And so hence I went with that persona. I'm from New Zealand. I live 3 hours north of Auckland and 40 minutes from my closest town drive. So I'm on the coast. I look over the Pacific Ocean. The sun comes out of the ocean each morning to greet my day, and it sets behind me at the end of the day in a mountain range called Manaya, which is the distance between ocean and mountain is extremely close. We're talking about less than 5 minutes to go from the water's edge to the foot of a mountain. And then it takes me, I try and climb it once a week, this particular mountain here, and it takes me about 35 minutes to get to the top. So it's got a good track. It's designed, for walking. So yeah, that's a bit about me and where I'm from. I've been working with Microsoft low-code platform since 2003. So the original low-code platform used to be called MSCRM. This is before it was called Dynamics, before, the Power Platform came about. But I fell in love with that piece of tech and the company I was implementing it in. And the reason I fell in love with it is it allowed a simple way to create solutions. And at that time, I was working at a training company, and it was used to run our training management system, our customer relationship management, and we built it end-to-end in MSCRM 1.2. So I was the first customer in New Zealand for that technology in 2003, so a long time ago.
Yeah. Wow. And you've definitely had serious skin in the game in terms of the dynamics and watching it kind of evolve into the Power Platform. So Mark, I feel like a lot of people probably know you for your 90-day mentoring challenge. So I'm curious to hear kind of your motivations in starting it. And then we can kind of delve into some of the lessons you've learned of running those cohorts. Because as you know, as I'm sure the people listening have seen, so many people who've gone onto your program have gone on to been MVPs, start their own companies, and have successful careers. Me personally being enrolled into the course before being an MVP, and then after kind of finishing it, achieving that. And I always have to thank you for that. So what was the motivation in starting the 90-Day Mentoring Challenge?
So I just recently moved to London. My wife, Meg, had taken a role at Google in London after she had been at Google in Australia. And so that moved us into London. Meg and I both had 5-year visas to work in London. Google's amazing company is that they put a visa in place for me with very little restriction. The only 2 things I wasn't allowed to do work-wise is I wasn't allowed to practice medicine.
Nice.
I didn't have a degree in medicine, so no problem there. And I wasn't allowed to become a professional sports player. No problem there as well. I'm not into playing sports professionally. So those were my only 2 restrictions from a visa. Anyhow, I was based in London, getting to know all the great community in the Power Platform Dynamics space in London. And more, I kept getting requests from people, not just in the UK, but all over the world for mentoring, because I was the old guy in the industry, had been around a while, and people were getting to the point in their careers and going, where do I go next? Most people I came across had fallen into the Power Platform because they ended up being asked to join a project. It wasn't something they came out of university and said, you know what, I'm going to get into the Power Platform. I'm going to get into Dynamics 365. Most people, I would hear stories of like a guy from Fender Guitars in the US. He was a sysadmin for Dynamics CRM in their organization. And he was just part of the ID department. He got handed the bit of software. You need to maintain it. He'd done that for 2 to 3 years, loved it, and was like, where to? What's next? So he found me via LinkedIn. So everything I do in life, one of my kind of key mantras is scale. How can I scale what I do? I don't want to focus so much on a one-to-one, because something that I'm teaching an individual probably would benefit a lot of other people. So in a one-to-one scenario, I want to record it and publish it and get it out there and make it available to more. And then the other thing I find is that when people ask questions, the more ears that are listening, the more that you pick up what's called tacit knowledge. You're like, I didn't ask that question, but boy, when it comes up later in my life, that's going to be valuable for me to know, right? And so you overhear this conversation. So I wanted to scale, so I came up with the 90-day mentoring challenge. It was 6 core modules, and every 2 weeks we would deliver a module for the 90-day period. It was all done live. And this is all pre-COVID. And so my goal, why I wanted to do it live and online, was for scale. One of the things that I had identified in the market is that there were a lot of people in various countries around the world that didn't have local MVPs. They didn't have any community around the Power Platform of Dynamics 365, and yet they wanted to gather these skills. They wanted to learn. And so I was like, how do I make it so they don't miss out, right? And so I wanted to make sure that, and that's why I chose online delivery. I didn't want to do it at an event in London, because that only restricted it to a London-based audience at that time. And so, yeah, the outcome of it has been over 1,400 people have been through the program, 70 countries from 70 different countries in the world. The 6 modules grew to 12 modules, so it expanded somewhat as the world has changed, right? And so the more I reviewed the program, it's been running, I don't know if it's 6 or 7 years now that the program's been running. And that was my motivation, scale, sharing. One of my purposes in life is to empower people to reach their full potential with tech, right? Yeah. So that's the niche is with tech. I'm not there to empower a hairdresser, for example, in how to cut hair. As you can see, I have no expertise on the subject. But for somebody that's in tech and they want to develop their tech career, where they've been in for, we've had people on the program that have been in 20 years. We've had people that have been in, the youngest person was 16 years old, and she was just finishing up her schooling in WA in West Australia, in Perth. And her father, the previous year, had done the 90-day mentoring challenge and recommended she did it. And she was highly interactive last year in the program. And so that's the extreme. Someone pre-career to people that, have very long careers. Had a lady yesterday talk to me about it. She's an expert in finance, financial systems. She spent the last 2 years using Dynamics 365 F&O and wants to know now, she loved that, but she's got this very strong financial rigor. Where should she chart her career? Her current employer doesn't really have the options. And so that was the other kind of motivator for me. I wanted to do what was in the interest of the individual, not the interest of the employer. Where most mentoring people had talked to me about is that if they got employee-based mentoring, they found that over time they noticed that mentoring is more in the interest of the organization rather than the interest of them as an individual excelling in their careers. So it was like excel in your career in context of our company rather than just, fly free and be and reach your full potential. And so that's been my focus for the 90-day mentoring challenge.
I love that. And I love what you mentioned kind of a little while back in terms of tacit knowledge. I mean, I remember personally coming into the first live call, I was very eager to join because I remember looking online and I couldn't find anything that was what I was looking for in terms of, I feel like I had technical understanding and I could still grow that by myself, but I feel like I didn't have, respectfully, the softer skills, which I feel like the 90-day mentoring challenge is really, really good at. And I remember joining the live call, and I'm not sure if you remember this, Mark, but it was you and Parvez, and you guys were just talking, and I was like a fly on the wall, and I was just there smiling and nodding, but I was really listening to what you were saying. And you mentioned at this point, I'd been posting on and off relatively inconsistently for about 6 or 7 months, not seeing much growth at all. Probably on LinkedIn getting about 50, 60 impressions. And I remember you saying something along the lines of, it's a numbers game. You get better with time and you just got to keep showing up. And it's something simple and it's something we all know, right? We all know deep down inherently. But I feel like an author I'm very fond of, and I believe you're very fond of, Alex Hormozy, often says, we often have to be reminded instead of taught, usually when it comes to these topics. And that was definitely that moment for me. So I remember taking that on and I was like, I'm just going to post as consistently as possible. And from that point, it's evolved from LinkedIn to podcasting, and it's unlocked so many doors and opportunities for me. So yeah, it's been an incredible experience. I mean, you've mentioned 1,400 people coming into the course. I didn't know it was that much. That is a lot. I mean, you've probably heard a lot of people's stories, a lot of people who've come through the challenge, who's gone through their careers. I mean, what is kind of a main blocker for most people? What is kind of a wall you're seeing people run into time and time again?
Blocker. They don't know what they don't know. I think that sums it up. And the reason I say that is the amount of people that thought that the area that they were working in was the universe. Mm-hmm. And what I do is, of course, expose all the different type of roles that you could take, all the different paths, all the different avenues, from starting your own business to contracting to the various roles involved in projects around this technology. And consistent feedback, people would say, I didn't even realize there was this area over here. And that really appeals to me. That's what I want to focus on. And then the other one is people have gone out and they've developed their technical skills and not realizing that that is the easiest skill to develop. The hard skill is soft skill. And you mentioned Alex Hormozy there. Leah Hormozy, his wife, said this in November the 22nd, 2024. It's ironic how soft skills are the hard skills to learn, right? And that really stuck out to me. Soft skills are often overlooked, but they are the difference between you making $300,000 a year income as opposed to $150,000 a year as a good developer or a good consultant. And so it's your ability to, and if I was to distill that down even further, the primary soft skill that you need to master is communication skills and become an expert communicator. There's time and time again, I've seen brilliant developers, technically, brilliant consultants, technically, brilliant architects, technically, and projects have failed because of their communication, and they have been asked to leave by customers because of their communication, right? And you can either instill confidence in the way you communicate, or you can create fear or perceived risk in the way you communicate, And it's, it's like using the word maybe to a client. Or maybe we could do this, or maybe we could do that. And they're looking, if you're in an architect role, they're expecting you to go, hey, here are the options. I recommend we go with this. Not maybe, because what you're doing is going, it sounds like you're not sure of yourself. And they're like, I thought we employed the expert who's meant to be sure and give us the correct advice. And so it might be that architect was absolutely right, they knew the way, but the way they communicated by using a word as simple as maybe created a blocker, and the risk meter went up for the client as to, does this person know what they're talking about? And I was called into that exact meeting. I don't think this architect knows what they're talking about. They're never sure of what they're advising, just because of the way they were communicating. And so that's why I say communication, absolutely critical. And then you need to know how to become an effective consultant. And a consultant is not just somebody that goes to another organization and consults in their business. It could be in your own internal projects. How do you bring your stakeholders together? How do you create the team? How do you produce a product? How do you innovate? How do you create? All of that involves around your ability to consult and therefore work with strategic parties and create value.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously, you know, we all hear it, communication is important in the sense of, I feel like it's kind of the story of a lot of developers' life, technically brilliant, but can't articulate themselves in the right ways. I mean, what are some practical things people can do to level up their communication?
My number one thing is practice. Mm-hmm. Right? You've got to put yourself in an environment where you are practicing. And when I say practicing, that means weekly. Mm. Weekly until you're at the point that you're at least an intermediate level communicator as assessed by your peers, or an advanced level communicator as assessed by your peers. Not self-assessment, right? Remember, communication is not what comes out of your mouth, it's what goes into the other person's ears or what goes into their eyes. That's communication, right? So it's down to how do you show up? When you go into a presentation or you go into a meeting, are you the person that always sits at the back? Do you always have your phone accessible and the screen on? You're communicating. Yeah. You're communicating to everyone in the room. You're not interested. This is not a priority for me. I'd rather do something else. You're communicating. Your body language is communicating. And oftentimes it's your body language that's telling or giving you away, right? It's showing your level of commitment. You're speaking through your body movements. And so these things have to be addressed, right? Because it could be purely your bad habits that are causing you to show up a certain way. And they're all addressable. How you speak is addressable. And the thing is that being able to communicate effectively really starts with your ability to verbally communicate. And that's a whole body experience, right? It's your eye contact, it's your hand gestures, it's how you build a connection with another party, it's how you build trust in the conversation that you're having. And so it takes practice, right? Because you really need to create muscle memory around a lot of how you communicate to others. And then, of course, what quickly follows, and sorry, why verbal is really important. And it's not so that you can go up and give speeches or speak at events or anything like that. There's something about being able to structure your thoughts and then communicate them to somebody else and for the other person to get it, to have almost like a mind meld, like, yes, and then be able to riff and connect off that. That's because you've actually been able to structure your thinking in a way that is receivable by the other person. You choose your words, you choose your structure. Once again, it comes down to practice. You can only look like a natural once you've created the habit, right? Then people are like, wow, they're a natural. Well, they probably built a habit to then come across as looking like a natural. And it's something that if you can do that, it'll set you up for any area of your life. In your private life, it'll set you up. It'll set you up in your professional life. And then I say closely behind that then is written communication. And, that's coming from me that I hated school. I hated writing essays. I hated writing, For me, it was like, how did I reach the minimum word count and get past, to achieve my goal? But what writing does, it allows you to refine your thinking. It allows you to really go, how will that be perceived, being that there's no audio tone, there's no body language going to be communicated? Does this piece of work that I'm writing, does it stand? Does it engage the other person's thinking to go deeper into whatever they're reading, of mine? And this is an area that I'm working on now. I'm developing this area in my career because I feel it's so important. So even though I have dyslexia, even though writing is not something that comes naturally, it's like anything in life. It's a muscle. You can work it. You can get better. You can develop it. Speaking is a muscle. Thinking is a muscle. And writing is a muscle. practice, practice, practice. You build it, you do resistance training, right? Your muscles break down, they get better, they build stronger. Same applies for so many soft skills.
Yeah, I love that approach. And I think that that was kind of an approach that I learned from you that I took when it came to building content, just staying consistent. I sucked at the beginning. I suck a bit less now, and you just consistently suck a little bit less until you're actually good. So it's interesting you say that, because on communication, I remember coming to university and it was my first year and I was super bored because it was lockdown and didn't really have anything to do. Clubs were shut, everything was shut. In some ways it helped me because I feel like I'm the person I am today because of that. But in other ways I was just looking for stuff to do. So I started reading, and I remember looking up best books to read or something. And like the top 3 was like How to Win Friends and Influence People and a couple others. So I picked up How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And at the time I was working at a warehouse, and I remember reading it a little bit, listening to it when I was kind of taking the bus. It was like an hour 40 to get to the warehouse. It was in the middle of absolutely nowhere. And I remember getting there, and it was, you had your headphones on, you were picking basically it was makeup supplies. You'd put it in a bag, you'd put it in a box, and you'd wait until the box was full and you move it along. Very mundane job. But I was starting to apply the things I was learning from that book. And Mark, I don't know if you've read that book, but it teaches very simple things like remember people's names. Like that is such a simple thing, but if you do it consistently, you will start applying it to every area of your life. And it's such an amazing thing to do. So I started doing that, and it took months because it was a mundane warehouse job. But towards the end of it, my job was getting easier. My manager was putting me into roles that didn't take too much of my physical capacity. Like I was kind of moving around. I was in the lower floor of the warehouse a lot, where I was basically completely alone, didn't really have much to do. And I feel like that really came from practicing that communication. So I think that's just to kind of reiterate the point that it doesn't matter where you are. It is such an important skill. And yeah, highly recommend How to Win Friends and Influence People if you haven't read that book already. Interesting. Okay, so Mark, I feel like after COVID, a lot of people lost their security. And I know you've spoken about this at length as well, but a lot of people lost the security of a full-time job. They realized the myth of having a full-time job isn't there anymore. People realize people were getting let go left, right, and center. I grew up in a generation and in a culture where we were watching short form content, YouTube videos. That's how we grew up, basically. We'll say, these influencers who kind of live the life and post about it. They post their fancy cars, their fancy houses. I think a lot of people in my generation think about entrepreneurship in the wrong way. I feel like a lot of people who are a little bit older think about it not in a similar way, but almost in a similar way. And I feel like there's some people who think about it in the right way. So what are some of the mindset shifts that you need to go from full-time into entrepreneur?
That's brilliant. So just a couple of things. I used to work in a warehouse, pharmaceutical, used to pick the line exactly like what you did, put the items, pharmaceutical, what was called OTC products. And I did that for a year. So I know exactly your warehousing journey, done that. And How to Win Friends and Influence People, brilliant book, right? Definitely one that I've read and highly recommend. Many stories in that will, resonate in my mind. When you come to you talked about COVID and post-COVID and the number of people that got laid off around the world. And I found it a very interesting thing to observe because one, I've spent over 30 years of my career working what I would call adjacent to Microsoft. So I've seen the inner workings a lot more than a lot of full-time staff that have been there 10 years, right? I've seen the 30-year window of Microsoft and its various elements and its history. And there was a deep sense for many, many years, right up to the end of COVID, that I think the fallacy is the concept of loyalty, right? An employee there's been an emphasis from business for many, many years that you need to be loyal to the company. Are you loyal to the company? Have you pledged your allegiance to the company? because your company's going to look after you. And it really comes, if you go back and look at the automotive industry in the US, Detroit, that type of area, you will see that people had jobs for 30 plus years with the single car manufacturer until it crashed. And everyone lost their jobs. And they had no next job to go to because they had no other skills than on the assembly line with a motor car. For not just the company disappeared, all the companies were disappearing. So you couldn't just go to your competitor, right? And there's been this fallacy, I believe, of that your company is loyal to you, and they are until you have no longer any value to them, right? And the thing is, value is a funny thing in that, let's say you've been at a company for 20 odd years, and your bonuses, incentives have racked up over time, right? The longer you stay, you get an extra week's leave, you get an extra percentage in shareholding, blah, blah, blah. And now when the company looks at you, when the finance department looks at you on a spreadsheet, you're at the top of the spreadsheet as one of the most expensive resources, but you're still only producing an output of X. When they look at the resource that was hired 2 years ago, and your output is at the same level as them, but your expense is 2 or 3 times the cost. So you've been a very loyal employee. You've done the hard yards. You've been there for years and years, and they pull out a red pen and they put it through your line in the spreadsheet. That can be remote. That could be on the other side of the world if you're in a global company and that red line has gone through your name and your manager is about to be notified that they're going to let you go. And so there's been this massive sense, as I said, of that your company is loyal to you. And it's a fallacy. It's a trick. It's a deception that they want you to believe. And I think that what happened at the end of COVID was the destruction of that. Because, as I say, my wife was working at Google and she saw a heap of her friends all lose their job. And these people were religious zealots for Google, right? They have a culture inside back then that, if you're a Googler, as they called it, you're part of this inside group. You didn't care about having a LinkedIn profile. You weren't looking for a job. You're a Googler. You are set. You had all the perks. You had lunch put on for you every day. You had morning tea put on for you every day. There were 5 or 6 different chefs on campus, and this was just in the Sydney location. In the London location, multiple offices. I would go in there, have my lunch and everything, all paid for by Google. It was an amazing experience, right? They wanted you to stay there. They wanted you to go out in the evenings with your colleagues, and all evolved around Google. It was amazing. And once again, they just started slashing staff left, right, and center, right? Because what COVID showed them is that the business, their profits went through the roof in COVID, and people weren't working from their offices or in their buildings. And all of a sudden they started going, oh, hang on a second. We've got this massive cost overhead. Can we do it leaner? Right? Could we do it in a leaner fashion? And this is what you're seeing, this massive movement around the world. If you can do your job remotely, why do we need to hire you in the US? Why do we need to hire you in the UK, where the employee rate is so much higher? Why don't we hire you in Bangladesh? Why don't we hire you in Pakistan, in India? Why don't we hire you in Argentina, where the cost of living is so much lower? But if you can do your job remotely, why can't we do it anywhere in the world? And so companies started to realize, well, hang on a second, we could do a much better cost model. And this is why I say it's a fallacy, and why as an individual, you've got to take stock of it and go, hang on a second, there's only one Lord and Master of your life, and that is you. But so many people have abdicated it to their company that they work for, or to their boss, or to their colleagues, rather than going, you know what, I'm 100% responsible for me. And then if you look at the future and where things are going with AI, and you look at somebody like Reid Hoffman, one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, and he said by 2035, 50% of the US workforce will all be subcontractors. Therefore, that means you're working for you. And what we've seen the rise of is the concept of what's called a solopreneur. How do you act like an entrepreneur, but you don't want to grow a company with multiple people? It's just about you, but acting like an entrepreneur, seeking out the opportunities that you want to work on because you enjoy doing them. Having a concept that you can work in a global market, you can work anywhere in the world and use time offset to your favor. And this is what I have built now into my life, right? After moving back from London to New Zealand, as I say, 40 minutes from my closest city. Why? Because I get to look out over the ocean, over green farmland. I'm 1 kilometer off my closest beach, and I've got 8 beaches around me and 2 mountain ranges around me that I can go climb. So I've got diversity of outdoor experience, and I don't have people all around me, yet I can jump on a call like this and communicate with you in London. And I'm working with customers across Canada, the US, Europe, all remote, because I have repositioned the way I've thought about my career, being that I am a global employee. I can work anywhere in the world for people that want my set of skills in their specific situation. I get to choose any job that I work on by doing that. And so what I've done is that Meg and I are solopreneurs. There's 2 of us because we're a team, married in that respect, but we're really acting like solopreneurs. We're not going out and hiring a ton of people. We are acting as individual people, building lucrative streams, multiple streams of income, not dependent on one, and living a lifestyle that we want to live. And that is to have our grounding here where we live, but we also want to live 3 months of the year in another country. Ongoing, all the time. Like every year, in our winter, we'll leave and we'll go and live in Europe somewhere, or Argentina, or Africa, or India, and we will go and experience totally different cultures, which will then expand our worldview, which will then bring more opportunity to us. And then we've got always this home base to return to. So we've really particularly crafted the type of work we want to do, the lifestyle that we want to have, and it's on our terms, right? And this is what I think everybody has the opportunity to. There's really no excuse. You got to understand, I couldn't read till I was, 12, 13 years of age. I've never been to university. I come from the bottom of the world. I don't come from a wealthy family. We were rural milking cows, dairy farmers, is what I've come from. And so not, smartly educated or anything like that, yet I've been able to create this lifestyle because I chose to. I read about it. I read the possibilities. I'm a big reader like you. And I find that really, if somebody else can do it in life, why can't I? Right? We've got to get the excuses out of the way. If someone else can do it, I know I can do it. I've got arms, legs, I've got ears, I've got eyes, I've got a brain. What else do you need?
What are some of the... I think it's important for us to take a step back in the sense of, I feel like a lot of people think they're blocked because they think they have to work very hard. They don't have the time. They have kids. They have families. They don't have a bunch of energy like they used to. What are some of the key things you tell those people to focus on that are wanting to make that jump?
Rather than what I tell, what do I do? There's a guy called Neville, which is probably he's most famous for what he called as tweet storms. Back when Twitter was Twitter, he would dump 100 tweets in one go. And of course, it was a multi-threaded. Each one was extremely poignant. And he was like, he wanted to distill down in his life what were the most important things to get right that had like knock-on effects to everything else. And his conclusion was, and this speaks to what you talked about, energy. I don't have energy. 1 year ago, I was 15 kgs heavier than what I am now. when I read his tweet storm on a flight, as in I listened to it. He did an audio 3-hour-long podcast on it. And I determined I was going to get fit. I wasn't going to get skinny. I was going to get fit. And because out of fitness, as you say, energy comes out of it, right? Now, I've got 2 kids. I've got 3 kids. One's 19, one's 4 years old, and one's 2 years old, right? And so the important thing there is any excuse will work for you. So what I'm meaning, if you want a reason not to achieve what you want to achieve, pick any excuse. I guarantee you won't achieve what you want to achieve, right? The choice comes when you decide to stop with the excuses and go, what do I need to do to achieve what I want to achieve? Taking into account my life and where it is now. What do I need to change? What do I need to sacrifice? You know, if we were to grab your phone and look at how many hours a day you spend on your phone by going into that setting, how many hours you're sitting in front of Netflix or Disney Plus or Prime or whatever it is, I can see in those hours is your destiny. You can either be a pacifist and absorb what other people want you to think and hear and watch and see and, you know, be the couch potato, or you can get up and choose your life. This year, Meg and I, 3 times a week, we go for about an hour and a half walk. We climb those mountains every week. We go around the coastline to the beaches. We get to swim without a single other person on those beaches around us. And because we're making fitness a core part of our life, and of course it's out of that comes energy. The second thing that I'm focusing on is my mind. How do I make my mind as sharp as possible? And there's a couple of things around that. One of the key ways to make your mind as sharp as possible is go walking. There's been so many studies that, see, already my fitness piece is now affecting my second goal, which is my ability to think and communicate, but more the thinking. And I mean, a little byproduct of it as well, it's great for a relationship, right? When you're doing it with your partner, to walk like that 3 times a week, that's just me and her time. So it's one of these habits that have all of a sudden you're realizing there's multiple benefits for nailing these things, right? So first health, then mindsets. And so out of that, the third area that has been a massive focus is financial literacy. I was never brought up to be financially astute. And Meg and I have gone through a process now for we were in Dubrovnik. We spent a month in Dubrovnik as part of our 18-month sabbatical. And in Dubrovnik, we read a book on that was written post the 2008 financial crash, where a lot of people in the US lost their money. And we read this book together on financial literacy, and ever since then, we've read 1 new book a year on financial literacy. And it has enabled us to become 100% debt-free. And this is from being extremely in debt, in toxic debt. I had a company that didn't work out as I intended, and I was left with $150,000 worth of what I call toxic debt. Toxic debt is debt that doesn't have an asset attached to it. You have to pay it off, and at the end of it, you've paid it off, but there's no value. You've got nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And so we went from that position to having over $80,000 in credit card lines of credit available to us, to now having no credit cards. We have no credit cards whatsoever, none, all accounts are closed, no debt whatsoever. We have a net worth that is steadily increasing, all because we have learned financial literacy in our life, and then we've applied that financial literacy also to our solopreneurship. And so our business now for 5 years has always been very profitable in how it runs, pays its tax on time, never owes anybody anything outside of 10 days. In other words, every 10 days, all my invoices are settled. We do that twice a month. We run that rotation. read a brilliant book called Profit First. And the other beauty of this book, Profit First, which I read while living in London, is that it means is that if you're an investor in a company, you wouldn't invest in a company that didn't pay you a dividend or a return on your investment. Generally, that's quarterly. So from day one of starting a business, you should be taking profit every 90 days out of your company. Right? And to probably over 50%, 80%, 90% of businesses around the world that are small businesses, that's just a boom, profitable, never been profitable. We run a loss. You don't understand it. Maybe you've just bought yourself a job. You're just working for yourself, but it's really just a job that you're indebted to. And so understanding profit first and the need to take dividends every 90 days is critically important to create. It changes your mindset and how you run an organization. And it gets you ahead of the game. It gets you ahead of the game, and you never have to fear creditors' loss, a deal going south, because you're never in debt or having a dependency on that if you're running it right.
There was a lot of gold there. Mark, I can't help but notice, and we've had a few conversations about this off the camera, you love reading, and I love reading. And you've just mentioned that a lot of your financial literacy, what I'm implying, comes from reading. So I suppose my question is, I used to read a lot on financial literacy when I was still in university, and they were talking about credit cards and they were throwing all these terms around. I was like, what the hell is this? And I got sick of it and shut the book and never opened it again. And now it just sits up on my bookshelf. How much is too much when it comes to reading? Because sometimes it can confuse me. Like I used to love reading a lot. I tried to read a book a week, and there was a lot of different opinions. And then sometimes I'd be reading and feeling guilty because I'm like, I should be working. I shouldn't be reading. So how much is too much when it comes to reading and knowledge in general?
Yeah. For me, it comes down to the quality of what you're reading. Right? I have a niece, hopefully she's not going to listen to this, who reads a book a week. And they are novels. Right? So I'm not seeing her increase her skill set. The reading is for pleasure, not for skill. I'm not a novel reader. I read one author that I do read his novels, and that is Dan Brown. And when I start reading his books, I read all through the night. Like, I can't put it down till I've read it cover to cover. So that's I got to read it, right? And I love it. I love it, love his books. And if you don't know Dan Brown, Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, there are many others, and they're all brilliantly written because he always weaves the real world into his books. And so if you've been to the places and stuff where he sets them, his most recent book was set in Spain, and it was about AI, and you got to think this was written in 2018. And I tell you what, just nail-biting book. The book you think ends 3 chapters before the end. You're like, you've nailed it. And then you get to the last chapter and you realize you've been hoodwinked in what you thought was what the answer wasn't. And it's mind-blowing. It's freaking awesome. But I don't think there are too much reading that you can do, because you get to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? When you read, you get to experience someone else's, could be 20, 30 years of distilled knowledge, and you get to read it in a book. I just find that is unbelievable. But when I read with the intention of taking action, right? So, for example, when I was deciding about religion, I read the Bible cover to cover 3 times. And at the conclusion of it, the 3rd time, I'd concluded that I would never read it again. And that religion was a man-made construct. This might offend some people. And the concept of God has been invented by man. And it was done many centuries ago when we didn't have the science that we had today. So it was a way of explaining the things that weren't explainable in the world. And it was a good way of controlling people particularly. And so when I read that, right, why did I go through that, reading that many times? Because I wanted to get really clear. My action was, am I going to commit to having religion in my life, Christianity specifically? And, I had looked at other religions. I had, but nothing to the degree, because I was brought up, in a Christian upbringing. And so I read to get an outcome. And I didn't just, cherry pick a bit. I read that 3 times, cover to cover. And that conclusion was, that was it. That was never going to be a part of my life going forward. And it's been amazing, my growth since making that choice, right? So whenever I take a book, I read it with the intention of, how do I action it? If I read Alex Hormozi's book on marketing, I want a list of action things that I'm going to do at the end of it. And so I will read it through cover to cover once, and then I will ingest the book into an LLM, right? So I digitize, I ingest it, and then I will write a whole bunch of prompts against that book around the actions that I'm going to take, and create very concise lists, processes, things that I'm going to do till I feel I've implemented that concept. And so that's what I'm always balancing together. I try to get 1 hour of book reading in a day now. And when I say now, since being in London, I've tended, that's kind of been my focus. In London, I think I read 82 books in my final year there in 2019 for the year. And I have more books on my reading list like that I own, that I've already purchased. I'm probably got at least 30 books that I haven't read that I've purchased at the moment.
Yep.
And I'm generally at that at any one time.
I think for me, reading was an absolute game changer, and I try and encourage people to read around me as much as possible. I feel like I can speak for myself, and at least for the people around me, they really struggle with reading because it's just so much easier to get information elsewhere. You've got TikTok, you've got shorts, you've got videos, but there is something truly powerful about having a book in your hands or a Kindle, and just consuming. Like you said, it's like someone has condensed years of knowledge for you, and all of the mistakes and all of the successes and all of the lessons, and it's just, I think it's an incredible way to learn. You mentioned AI, LLMs, and how you use it with your books. So I know you have a lot of opinions on this topic. How are you using AI on your day-to-day?
So one of the things when I buy books, I always buy 2 copies of every book I buy. I buy the Kindle version and I buy the audio version. And that's how I consume. I found that I get a high degree of retention if I can follow the words on the Kindle while listening to it at the same time. And I can do that at 2 times the speed. And the second part of it, as I said, was then, okay, what are all the actions I'm going to take? And so what I do is I grab my Kindle book, I remove the digital rights management off that Kindle book, I create a custom GPT, which is now just the raw text of that book, and I use that as a basis for the model. Now, I have no problem removing the DRM that I'm using for personal use only. It's my book, and I'm wanting to do a thorough research on it. So then what I do is with the LLM, I will say, okay, create me a list of, the 10 things, and it might even be based on my highlighting while I was going through. I might extract the things that I highlighted, blah, blah, blah. And I'll create my action list for me to do something about those things, right? So that's my kind of my book activity. I use, I'm on the $200 plan for ChatGPT.
How's that going?
Yeah, brilliant. As in, use it constantly. Paid for Perplexity, paid for Stable Diffusion. I've paid for Claude, Midjourney. Had subscriptions to all those. I don't necessarily have them all active right now, but I've paid for them over time, and use Grok as well. And of course, any new one like DeepSeek that pop up, I always give them a good crack as well. I've installed LLMs locally on my own computer. So 10 gigs. I've got an NVIDIA chip on my as in graphics card, so it allows me to. And I've specifically done that in the image creation space, using stable diffusion. So incredibly powerful what you can do. If I'm on the couch, I will go straight to audio and have an audio conversation all the time particularly with ChatGPT. I find the audio experience just outstanding. If I am, outside working, I might scan a tree, like say, hey, can you see this tree that I'm looking at? That'll identify a tree. And I'll go, listen, I want to optimize how I prune it. What would you suggest? And it'll come back and go, and it'll just talk to me back, based on what it's visually seeing and research and stuff. And so I use it everywhere. Like, I hardly search anymore, right?
Right.
For whatever, find me a list of that. Get me a list of this. What are the top 10 fruit trees that grow in my area, right? These are the type of lists I'm always getting it to create and do. And then let me read up about this plant. Provides me a link to it. I can read up about a plant, that type of thing. So it permeates everything that I do. When I open my browser, it always opens up at least one or two AI tabs in the default settings. I'm using Copilot massively for the work I do in consulting, because it's got all my body of knowledge, right, that it's ingesting and training on. It's got all my what did I say to this client about blah blah blah, bang, it's got my emails, etc. You said blah blah blah, so to be able to synthesize all this data and digital exhaust that I'm creating all the time, Copilot just can't be beat because of its ingesting everything that is inside my, business domain structure. And so it's kind of like I use different tools for different things. I don't believe, like, one of the things, the anti-patterns that I learned from the Power Platform in Dynamics 365 is the fallacy of the golden tool, right? Which is where back in the day, I built a payroll system inside Dynamics CRM because I was of the mindset I could build anything on Dynamics CRM back in the day. Now, in hindsight, it was a dumb thing to do because Azure wasn't where it was today, and I wouldn't necessarily do that, nowadays. But I was living under the fallacy of the golden tool, that my tool could solve everything. Power Apps can solve anything. Power Automate can solve everything. And then people expand it to the golden toolbox. It's another anti-pattern that my set of tools are the best in the world. I don't know about what SAP has. I don't know what Oracle has, but I've been trained on this and they're the best. And it's like, your training bubble is not large enough. And so you believe that these are the golden tools. And I feel that the same thing applies with AI. I don't just have one tool. It's like I am trying all different types of tools. One of my favorite ones that I use is napkin.ai, right? Which allows me to take a whole bunch of stuff that I've written and say, hey, how would I visualize what I've written? And it creates these great visual diagrams that are all, vector-based diagrams that are, recolorable, reusable, composable. So if I use them as part of a PowerPoint or something like that, it is extremely powerful tool. So yeah, I don't believe in just one AI. It's for me, it's like what one is going to help me do what I need to do right now.
Yeah, most definitely. I think when they were all coming out, the Claudes, the ChatGPTs, the Copilots, I was getting a little bit overwhelmed myself because I was like, I don't even know what to use for what, but I feel like you naturally gravitate to the ones that are most useful for you once you kind of give them all a go and you realize what can do what better. I feel like that's really important. I mean, Mark, you have a lot of emphasis in learning. I know you put a lot of time aside for yourself to think. I know, you've put in the group chat a couple of times that you want to spend more time thinking this year deeply. And please tell me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what I read. Yeah, and you deleted social media as well, from what I can understand. I saw in your LinkedIn pictures gone grey, and I believe for your other social medias as well. So I guess my first question is, how are you feeling?
Yeah, so that was from, I've been doing that since the start of the year. So I removed all social media apps from my phone. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't every now and again jump into a web browser because I know I need to respond to something. But otherwise, it's funny. By removing them off the phone, all of a sudden, I'm not using them anymore. And it's not like that I've left them that I can't go to the web browser and, of course, access. But there's a brilliant thing around habits, right? If you can remove the trigger, all of a sudden your behavior changes. And all removing the apps did off my device was remove the trigger. Trigger's gone, and all of a sudden my mind wasn't going there and wasn't needing to just doom scroll and look at content. And of course, the flip side of that is look at vanity metrics. How well am I doing? How's my post performing? Blah, 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 blah. And so it's been massively enlightening. And, this is from somebody that's been heavily on all social media channels. But the thing is, this year I needed to, am I still creating content? Yes, but much bigger pieces of content that requires a lot more thinking and doing and stuff. And so, you'll see that come out later this year in the work I'm doing. So I've needed to remove the distraction. And I'm not saying this is for everybody, but for me, I needed to remove the distraction. I could see how much time, as I say, I was spending on it, and I was constantly snacking. And one thing, when you start tidying up your health and you realize how snacks can sometimes be, to your disadvantage, your mind applies the same thing. Are you just going to snack, or are you going to really choose something over that's substantial and it really makes you think and contemplate and change the way you live, operate, do something? And so that's kind of the phase that I'm in. Will I be like that forever? I don't know. I can't imagine right now, but I'm only 2 months in at the moment, whether this is going to be long term. I think I'll use social media from a marketing perspective, but 99% sure I'll be subcontracting it to somebody to do. And what I mean by that is, let's say I want to market the 90-day mentoring challenge, I'll bring an agency in to market the 90-day mentoring challenge. If I want to market the Microsoft Innovation podcast, rather, in the past, I've tried to do all of it. And what I'm realizing is I can actually hire somebody that's a real guru just in this little piece here and let them do it. Yeah. And so that's what I'm moving to, a model. And that, you've heard me talk about, as I prepare for an agentic world, which, by the way, I believe everything we're hearing about agents at the moment is just still marketing rather than reality. It's really just automation under a new title that we're seeing at the moment. But when we get to true agenticness and having agents work on our behalf, you need to be really good at delegating as an individual. Mm-hmm. You have to become a master at delegation, because you're going to delegate ultimately to AI to do stuff. And so if you've not been in a management type role in your career and you don't know how to delegate, you need to find out how you're going to learn how to delegate. And so that's where, you can hire other people to do parts of things that you need done in your work life or even your private life, and get good at delegating. Like, I'm getting mega good at writing briefs, like real detailed briefs. I want a new design done. I've got a new podcast coming out shortly called The AI Advantage. And when I wrote a brief to the designer, and the designer's done the cover art, the logo, the animation sequence, because it's going to be a video, and the animation outro at the end, that was a very concise design brief that I have given the designer to work with. And I've got better in time at being very concise in my delegation, and also getting very clear metrics back from, are you on track? Like, I get, I've got a range of VAs that now work for me, virtual assistants, in multiple countries around the world. And each day they come back to me at the end of the day just via WhatsApp with, the report for today's activities. And so I can monitor and make sure that I'm getting the value that I'm paying for as part of that. And it's teaching me to be a master delegator. And why do I want to become a master delegator? Because I know I'm going to have to do it with AI shortly. Yeah. And I want to be really precise and concise when I do that delegation. So I'm learning the skill now. So when the tech is there, it'll be a natural transition for me to start using AI from an agentic point of view.
Yeah, no, I love that perspective. And one of my favorite books, and one of the first books I read, I mentioned on that list, was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey, I remember reading it and I was like, he's banging on a lot about delegation. I was like, what does this even mean? Like, first year university student, I was like, I'll just do everything myself. I think now I'm putting a lot of value in that. I have a partner, we work together on some stuff. She helps me with these thumbnails, which is awesome. And it's a small thing, but it's crazy how these small things can start lining up and you start learning a lot from them. So yeah, highly recommend delegation if you've got the capacity to do it. I don't know about you, Mark, but I'm the same as you. Like, I struggle to let go. Like, I like to keep everything controlled in the sense of, I love to do everything myself. I like to keep everything looking the way that I want it. But I feel like you said, if you can get really good at writing briefs, then you can almost take your thoughts and make them into reality. So I think that's a serious skill as well. Mark, we're going over the hour here, but I have a couple more questions for you, if that's okay. The first one being, and one that I wanted to ask at the beginning of the podcast, but I think it makes more sense to do it at the end. But what's one thing you feel like most people need to hear?
It's an Adam Sandler quote.
Okay.
You can do it. You can have it all. You just got to choose. You've got everything that you need. You have the ability to learn what the gaps that you have, but you can absolutely do it. I can't find a single person that I've come across that really couldn't achieve all they want and desire to achieve. But you got to stop looking at others, get a real clear sense of what does success look like for you? What does wealth look like for you, right? Wealth for me is that Meg and I drive for 20 minutes to take our kids to daycare together each day and pick them up together each day. Why? Because we control our schedules, right? An employer doesn't tell us when we can do that. That's wealth, right? That we get to, that I have, my two kids that are 4 and 2, I know I have spent more time with them than my 0 to 18 years of life with my parents. I've already spent more time with my kids. I'm in their lives. I'm playing with them all the time. When they come home, my schedule is blocked for family time right through till they go to bed. It's very unusual that something can take control of that, right? And so you can do it. You can construct the life and really be wealthy based on your definition of wealth. Everyone has what they need. It's inside you. You need to bring it out of yourself. It's not external. It's within you. You can tap into it.
Yeah, really powerful. And I think on that as well, I also echo what you said and say belief is really important. Like, I've been through phases where I haven't believed and I've seen kind of those things that I haven't believed in not go so right. But I feel like the opportunities that I did believe in, I've seen those fruits. So I feel like having faith, having belief that what you're doing is the right thing. It's hard, but it's important. And you mentioned something there about comparison, which again, I think is gold. I think it's the thief of all joy. It's a quote we hear consistently, but I wholeheartedly believe that. Final question for you, Mark. And I feel like you alluded to this when you spoke about wealth, but I always like to ask what happiness means to my guests. So what does happiness mean to you?
Very, very easy. And this was an exercise that I did 30 years ago. Was I wanted to define what I wanted in life. Like, could I distill it down? And of course, the first thing most people think of is money, right? I want lots of money. And I was like, well, it doesn't seem, it's just, money's a construct. It's a transaction. It's a tool. And for me, it got down to one thing, and that is freedom. Freedom to choose whatever I want to do in life, choose wherever I want to live, choose the people I want to hang out with, choose the projects I want to work on. All that comes down to freedom, right? I want the freedom. And when you nail financial literacy, it enables you to create a massive amount of freedom, right? Because if you've nailed your financial literacy, I would assume that you're applying it. That's why you've nailed, right? You're doing it well. And all of a sudden, right, you can choose to have the best healthcare, right? Because you can afford it. You can choose to live wherever you want because you can afford it. You can choose the education for your children because you can afford it. You can choose all the books you want to read because you can afford it, right? And this is why freedom is such an important construct for me and why it brings me unlimited happiness. But if I think of what my ultimate goal is in life, my ultimate goal is this, is that when I am old and my kids are all growing up and you know, in their adult stages in life, that they'll want to hang out with me. Right? That they will consider my friendship so important in their life that they want to be around me.
Wow.
I think friendship from your children really speaks to your character.
That is so powerful. And I feel like a lot of fathers and mothers out there listening to this can definitely relate to that. It's always been a dream of mine to be a father one day. And I think when that does happen, I will have that same goal. But yeah, that's incredible. Thank you, Mark. We've gone over, we're 6 minutes over. Thank you so much for this interview. I feel like I've learned so much. It's been the longest one yet, so you hold that crown. At the end of these podcasts, I always like to roll out the red carpet, let the people know what you're up to, where they can find you. The floor is all yours.
Awesome. So you can always message me on LinkedIn, and if it's a personal message, it should get to me. That's the best way to find me. The projects I'm working on are all around Cloud Lighthouse. So if you go to cloudlight.house, you'll find everything we're working on, particularly around my big focus at the moment is on trustworthy AI. And that is around the entire framework to implement AI in the enterprise and get to ultimately an AI ops model, where you're not just at a rollout of Copilot and Copilot adoption across the organization, but where you're really innovating with AI and building new products, new services, new solutions, optimizing your supply chains, optimizing service, sales, efficiency, marketing, etc. for the organization. So you'll see in the next couple of months big announcements around trustworthy AI and end-to-end. We're developing software around facilitating this. We're setting up legal partners across Europe. We just signed our first law firm in the United Kingdom, over 1,000 lawyers inside the business. And they are doing our legal cover for the customers that, it's the first time where technology is going to need a lot of legal coverage, as part of the implementation, because there's things like the EU AI Act, there's the UK AI Act coming out. Singapore, Australia, all these different countries are now really putting in legal constructs around these. And so therefore, for organizations to be able to scale their AI initiatives, they need, one, the legal protection. They need a solid framework for doing that. And so that's my massive focus at the moment.
Yeah, super interesting. And I think I heard Chris Huntingford mention, I think I was watching him talk, and he mentioned lawyers bill by every 15 minutes or something crazy like that, which is insane. Yeah. So I'd be eager to understand how they take to AI, since it, in retrospectively, we take a step back, it, should save us time. But, that's a conversation for another day, I guess, Mark. Thank you very much.
It's every 3 minutes, not every 15.
3 minutes? That is insane.
Minutes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yep.
That's where the money's at. All right, amazing. Yeah. Mark, thank you very much. Thank you all at home for listening to this. If you got any value out of this, please go and show Mark some love and join the 90-Day Mentoring Challenge if you haven't already. I got a ton of value out of it, and I know you will too. Mark Smith, thank you very much. Take it easy.
Ciao.